We will soon be going to the polls, and our time-honoured voting system will hopefully produce an elected government and an opposition. This programme examines how a general election is administered so that our democratic choices as electors can be exercised.
I can start doing preliminary things like getting the stationery for the polling stations, printing forms, painting the ballot boxes, checking that the polling booths we'll use in the polling stations are up to scratch, if need be, repair them, paint them. So yes, before the date is announced, we can do something, but certainly the fun starts once the date of the election is announced.
You have an extensive timetable of things that have to happen by a certain date, don't you?
That's right. Once I get the read from the governor, that triggers off a timetable, which is there in the law, saying what must be done so many days before the election. Let's say 28 days before the election. In the timetable, we've got a task of inviting nominations for candidates, the most important thing in the poll. And then we carry on, as days progress, we do certain things.
Now, how do you select staff for the election?
We try to select staff from within the civil service. What happens is that we've got internal circulars where we'll invite members of the public service to join us for the day. I've got powers to recruit from outside the service if need be. I always remember retired civil servants who've got a lot of experience, and obviously on the day they'll be an asset to have with us. But primarily it's from within the service.
The votes were counted in counting rooms, and each counting room had a team of 7, a counting officer and 6 counting officers. If we had 10 rooms, that meant recruiting 70 staff. And all these were recruited from the civil service itself.
Clive, you were returning officer for the last elections. How different were your responsibilities to the previous elections that you'd attended?
Well, in the previous ones I could afford to know that there was someone else taking the blame, shall we say, and you always could consult, but at the end of the day, when you're actually the returning officer, everybody comes to you with the queries, so the buck really stops there, and then you can't go any further because you're really the man who has to decide.
Essentially the second in command to the returning officer. I make sure that the polling stations are properly equipped, that the staff is available for polling. I liaise very extremely closely with the counting supervisor. Do behind the scenes things that have to be done, 1,001 things, stationery, policing of stations, meeting with election agents. In fact, the whole administration of the election behind the scenes before the polling day, and running the outside business of the actual polling on the day itself.
I used to be involved at the polling stations, both as a polling clerk and the supervisor. And but I felt that it was in the count that, in other words, where the action was, the hub of the matter. And obviously my experience, question of dealing with figures and so on, they thought, well, yeah. And from then on, I used to normally say, well, I'd rather go for counting as against the polling stations, yes.
Well, basically, you go to places like Mount Alvernia or the different hospitals, people who can't come out, older folk who are incapacitated or prefer sort of not to come out. They have to actually be on a list which one visits them. I remember going up to the Upper Rock where the Hawes used to live, and they've now both departed this world, but certainly that sticks in the mind, and obviously going to KG5 and the different hospitals where again it's a responsible position, I think.
And the roving presiding officer travels with high security. He travels with another officer, policeman, I believe,
yes,
in a van.
And 2 people obviously who are there as overseers. Apart from if anybody from any of the parties wants to come along, they're also. But you certainly have yourself as the people who assist you, and as I say, 2 overseers who are nominated by the clerk or the returning officer, obviously, to make sure that everything is above board.
Well, when I received the writ from His Excellency, that triggers off a sequence of events. The first one is that I announce in the press and in the Gazette that an election is going to take place and when that election will be held. Then we carry on with the timetable, which is set out in the House of Assembly Ordinance. For example, one of the first things the table tells you to do is to invite nominations for candidates. Then we carry on and we invite people to apply who want to vote by post, the absentee people, people who are sick at home. Then we invite those nominated to elect their own election agents, polling agents, counting agents, observers who go around houses. So as I said, the timetable is there and the writ triggers off the timetable.
Now, what security precautions are taken actually in polling day?
We've got a number of security precautions so that the people can rest assured that the poll is conducted entirely properly. In my past experiences, the polls in Gibraltar have always been conducted perfectly, and I don't see any chance of the next one not being conducted partially, fairly, and with integrity. We start first of all with the polling box. As you see here, once before the polling station is open, the presiding officer will invite any election agents present, the police constable present there, to witness that the box is empty. And once we are satisfied the box is empty, we get a long piece of red tape, like shown here, and the box is sealed. That means that it's tied round with one piece of red tape in such a way that you can't really slip it off. So the box cannot be opened during the course of polling except by cutting the red tape. And the presiding officer will affix his own seal there, as shown here, okay? And that is left intact throughout polling. So that's one security precaution. Again, when a person is issued with a ballot paper, once he identifies himself to the polling clerks there, and the polling clerk is satisfied that the person who says he's so-and-so and lives in such a place, and is entitled to get a ballot paper, he will get a ballot paper, but that ballot paper will be perforated with a seal there. Now, as added precaution, the pattern of that seal will be kept secret. By law, it's got to be kept secret, and only the day before the election will I decide what pattern we are going to use there. So there's no way, no one can, let's say, try to prepare himself with printing ballot papers, getting this, so that anything other than a valid ballot paper will eventually go in there. So the person, once he gets this, will go into his polling booth in secrecy, vote as he wishes, and again, to doubly check that before the person leaves the polling station, there'll be a clerk beside the ballot box not checking whether he's voted correctly or anything like that. We don't want to see what a person in secret has marked in the ballot paper, but we want to see that the seal is there, and that goes then inside the ballot box. Okay? So we are making sure that only the ballot paper given to that person will eventually go in there.
In spite of all the information available to the public, people still make silly mistakes when polling. Mm-hmm. Now, which are the most common of these mistakes?
Well, as I say, people tend to maybe put on an additional cross, or maybe put a vote and something else than a cross, you know,
or vote for 9 perhaps instead
precisely,
of 8.
This is what I'm saying, you know. So obviously these cannot then be taken as when you do the count. Obviously, that table which has something like that, these are put to one side.
Now, these are discovered only in the counting room. They're not perhaps discovered at the polling station.
No way. I mean, when you leave the polling station, I mean, the ballot box is sealed and it's taken, you know, by to the people up there, and it isn't open there and then when you get to counting is when these things come up.
Yes, there are quite a number of papers usually challenged by the candidates' representatives at the counting officer stage. Any paper that had anything that the candidate representative thought was not a valid paper, the counting officer was required to put it into what we know as a doubtful papers tray. As the counting progressed, I, as counting supervisor, it was my responsibility to go round the counting rooms, pick up those doubtful papers, which I locked into a briefcase, and brought them up to the returning officer, who in turn, with the candidate's representatives, adjudicated those papers. In a good majority of cases, the papers were declared valid, because the doubtfulness was very slight. There were other papers who were really doubtful and had to be adjudicated invalid by the returning officer.
The returning officer, what he does is he goes through them in his own mind and says to himself, what is this? What do I think this is? And then he calls the election representatives of the parties who are contesting, and including if there's an independent, and you sit them round the table and you go through and say, look, this is what I think of this one, and I suggest this. But it's always best that you get agreement from all of them. Sometimes you trade, say, look, this one is a little corner going towards this one, but that one is, and provided that everybody's happy, that there's no doubts as to it. If in doubt, the best thing is to reject it. But of course, there are certain cases where you have, of the 8, you put 7 which are perfectly legible and you know where they're going, and there's 1 that is not. So you allow the 7 and reject, if not, or adjudicate on the 1 that is causing the problem.
Postal voting is really for those persons who, being on the electors list, will not be here, or they think they will not be here on polling day. So what happens is that once the writ has been issued by the governor requiring the returning officer to carry out an election within a certain period, a notice is published by the returning officer for inviting applications for postal voters. A requirement is, as I said before, the postal voter, or the person who wants to vote by post, must be in the electors list, and he must provide an address outside Gibraltar to where the ballot paper is to be sent. Once that is done, in due course, the ballot paper is issued, and for the issuing of ballot papers, what we attempt to do is to have as many representatives of election agents, or the election agents themselves, overseeing and being witnesses to the fact that everything is being done fairly and squarely. Once the ballot paper is received in the returning officer's office here in the House of Assembly, these are placed inside a box, which I understand you already have had taken a shot of, and those are in turn sealed and taken to the counting rooms to be counted in due course. And again, the ballot box will be opened in front of witnesses, if possible, election agents themselves or their representatives.
Is the size of the postal vote significant in terms of numbers?
Not in terms of numbers. Last time, if I recall, there were about 130 odd, and about 88, I think, came back out of those 130. Now, it all depends how the remainder of the electorate votes. If a candidate doesn't go in, or the difference between two candidates is very small, the postal vote might
be able to swing it.
Exactly, but we never know. It all depends what the electorate decides.
When the verification of the boxes was complete, all the papers were brought up to the returning officer's table, and they were distributed to the counting rooms, so that, for example, if you had 10 counting rooms, each counting room received 1/10 of the contents of any particular ballot box. At the end of the distribution, all the papers that came from the different polling stations were distributed amongst the different counting rooms, so that no indication could be given or taken of how any particular ballot, any particular polling station produced votes for any particular party or candidate.
All those votes, right, all those papers are then mixed by the returning officer and then allocated to 14 teams. So the team will then get a proportion of
1/14 of the votes cast.
Exactly. If there were 14,000, we'll get 1,000 each team. That's right. Yes.
So, and how then is this count approached? How many people are in the team?
The team is composed of 7, each team. There are 6 counting clerks and the counting officer. The counting clerks are in pairs. So you have 3 pairs, and each pair would be allocated a third of the names of the candidates. So assuming, let's say in this election, as can happen, if there are 4 parties and each party has 8 candidates, you'd have 32. And if there is an additional sort of independent one, you would have 33. So therefore each
counting pair
would have a third.
Would have
11.
a third of those names, right?
Would have 11, yes.
There's an officer at the head of the table who's in charge, and there may be 10 or 12, different people there. They are done on a duplicate basis. I mean, somebody opposite you, the votes are sort of signaled by this officer at the head of the table. Well, votes for so and so and so and so and so and so, and these are jotted down in the different papers, and they're in batches of 50. So once 50 have gone through, then there's a stop. You go through, you check with your opposite number that you've taken correctly, and that's, so I mean there's checking and counter-checking all the way through, and so I don't think that there can be errors at the end of the day.
And again, this process, of course, you have overseers from the actual parties themselves.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're in a room which there's overseers, there's people from every party,
Independent
just
observers.
people from the public. I mean, the normal public can come in and look around. I mean, I've done it myself. I say, being interested in what's going on, you go around all the different rooms, see what's happening, and so.
How many polling stations will there be?
I think we'll keep to 11. We had 11 in the last election, and although we've got lots of people living in West Side, I think I'll be maintaining the 11 polling stations because there's been a reduction in the number of people living within the town area. So I've reduced the town area districts from 3 to 2 and transferred 1 to West Side. So we're keeping to 11.
How do people with physical impediments vote? How are they assisted?
Yes. Well, if they are at home, they'll be dealt with by the roving presiding officers. Mm-hmm. If they're able to go to the polling station and they need assistance, the assistance will be provided by the presiding officers. Mm-hmm. No one else is allowed to help them.
And in the case of a blind person?
Well, a blind person will be asked who he wishes to vote for, mm-hmm. or alternatively, he might already bring in a list of those persons for whom he wishes to vote, in which case the presiding officer will follow this person's instructions to the letter.
And copy the ballot paper for him.
Exactly.
Right.
Always informing this voter if he exceeds the number of 8 which he can vote for. Mm-hmm. Telling, look, it's pointless for you, sir, to vote for 9 because your vote will not be of any use to anyone. But insofar as the number reaches up to 8 and no more, he'll follow those instructions to the letter.
When is the counting officer's work done, and what happens immediately after?
Well, when he's gone on the assumption that he's got 1,000 votes, so he's gone right through, that everything has married, in other words, has been checked as each batch of 50 has been progressed. So he's gone through the 1,000 and they've all been checked. Right. Assuming his, shall we say, the team that has finished first, then he would get another batch of the doubtful papers that the returning officer has already processed. Exactly.
Because I was mobile and I was moving from one counting room to another, as soon as I saw that a counting team had finished their work, I collected the statement of the contents of that room with the result, the box with the papers and the counting officer, and we all came together to the returning officer.
There has never been any doubt on the system as such, on the fairness and on the accuracy of the system.
No, because I think that there are people watching and they know that although it's a tedious thing, and you count and you say, at the end of the day, everybody knows that what they're doing there, and you are under the eagle eye and any mistake, when the people really go out of their way to be absolutely certain. No one wants to put the show down, so to say, being shown up. So it's a very transparent system, and although tedious and time-consuming, without computers, I think it's the best. Mm-hmm. It's a tried and tested system.
What is the actual procedure for voting on polling day?
Fine, I'll be as brief as possible on that one. But the first thing is that the person comes in to the polling clerks and identifies himself or herself. I am so and so, my address is so and so. I should add that there will be polling agents, representing the candidates there, just keeping an eye on the whole procedure, and they can challenge anyone who tries to impersonate someone else. If that's the case, well, it's the clerk's task to ask the person for ID card, passport, any form of identification to the satisfaction of the polling agent there. Right. Okay. Well, once we are satisfied that the person is the person who says, that person will get a ballot paper and will be crossed off the register. The idea being that no one will vote twice in the same election. So you cross off the person, as I said earlier, the ballot paper is taken off the book, stamped with the secret embossed stamp there, and the person goes into the polling booth and in secrecy votes for whoever the person wants. On coming out, the ballot paper is checked that it's got the seal, it goes into the ballot box, and that person is invited to leave the polling station as quickly as possible.
The voting system that we have at the moment has been with us perhaps for 40 years or over 40 years certainly. Has it served us well in those years?
I think it has, because it was tried. I was involved with the count from the very first election in 1950, when we had the proportional representation system, which was quite cumbersome. This was afterwards replaced by another system devised by us civil servants. I remember the late Joe Pitaluga, who was involved when he was returning officer. Again, that system was not 100%. So eventually the subsequent returning officers adopted the system that was used in the old city council elections, which I think someone has explained it to you already.
Right, and of course this system is accurate and it's transparent and it is absolutely reliable.
I find it 100% foolproof.
Is it always a gratifying experience to assist in the elections?
I certainly feel so, and you like to do, everybody likes to do a good job, whatever you're doing, and I'm sure, talking for all the present and past civil servants, that we certainly do a good job and certainly a foolproof job.
Before we actually start the nitty-gritty of the election, the staff, the returning officer, calls in the election agents, and between them they decide how to run the election within the parameters provided by the law, i.e. whether they're going to play a dirty campaign or not, which is entirely up to them. But from the point of view of time on radio, time on TV, where the posters are going to be put up, what space within the areas allocated for posters is available for one party or the other. So it's really a consensus of everyone working to ensure that the democratic process is duly carried out fairly and squarely.
If you were asked to take part in the forthcoming elections, perhaps again as a counting officer, would you perhaps...
I wouldn't mind. I'd be honoured to.
You believe in the system, you like the system?
Very much so, yes.
A person may need assistance, either because their eyesight is not very good or they can't really remember who they want to vote for. But the presiding officer is there to help. The presiding officer, obviously, we've got an impartial person there that will go with the voter inside the polling booth to assist the person. And he must assist the person very impartially, not to influence the voter in any way, not to do anything that the voter doesn't want. He's just there with a ballot paper and a pencil saying, who do you want to vote for? Either read out the names, tell them to what political party they belong to, if they belong to a political party. So what I want to say is that only the wishes of the person who wants to vote would be marked in this paper, without any way of molesting or influencing the voter. So yes, we give assistance. And after having assisted the voter, the presiding officer is obliged to fill up a form saying, I've assisted so-and-so in her or his election of the candidates for the following reason: bad eyesight, didn't remember the person. There are times where people know who they want to vote for, but they can't remember the name. They would recognize the person. So we've got a chart with photographs of all candidates. Again, that can be shown to the voter, saying, would you point out who's the person you want to vote for? And once the voter identifies the person in that chart, well, we go into the polling station, polling booth, and mark that cross there. So there is assistance, and everyone should not be weary of calling on the presiding officer for assistance.
What happens to ballot papers after the elections? We all go home, everybody knows the results, but the team has to stay there and do something to the ballot papers.
The election rules tell you what you have to do. You have to bind them, you keep them together, you put the rejected votes and mark them, and everything is sealed. There's a constable or two constables always in the room. You then make the packages up as required by the law, and you contact the Register of the Supreme Court and you say, look, at approximately, it could be 7 or 8, depending on the length of time that the count has taken. You then proceed under police escort to the Supreme Court, where the register is awaiting you, and under police escort you deposit them in the safe of the Supreme Court, where they're then kept, and the law prescribes certain times in which a petition can be presented based on the points that you wish to raise. It could be 14, 21 or 28 days, and they must be made to the Chief Justice in chamber.
Once the results are announced, everything is bundled up. So that means the ballot papers that have been counted, ballot papers which have been rejected, ballot papers which have been cancelled in the polling station, all the accounting documents, all certificates, as I said earlier. If you assist a voter, the presiding officer must fill in a certificate. All that is bundled up, put in brown paper, sealed with my seal, and it's taken the following morning, early in the following morning, to the Supreme Court, where it's put in vaults there, and it's given to the Register of the Supreme Court for custody. And it stays there for 4 years until the next election.
Once in the custody of the registrar, the ballot papers are virtually untraceable. By their very nature, they are anonymous and can only be paired off to a counterfoil stored separately. That is, assuming a specific ballot paper could be retrieved from among those split up into 14 packages of around 1,000 ballot papers each. So, when it comes around, exercise your democratic right and vote in complete confidence that our voting system is trustworthy.